In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where countless species have risen to claim their place among the stars, there exists a universal truth that transcends worlds and cultures: the strong survive and the weak are cast aside. On the mining station Kepler 442b, this harsh reality plays out daily among the Felinian workers, a proud feline-like species known for their precision, agility, and unwavering adherence to genetic perfection. But what happens when that perfection is challenged by something as simple as the wrong color of fur? What occurs when ancient superstitions collide with the cold vacuum of space? And most importantly, what can one human, armed with nothing but compassion and a toolkit, do against centuries of ingrained prejudice? This is the story of how humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, our weapons, or our ships. It's something far more powerful and infinitely more dangerous to those who would harm the innocent: our refusal to look away when others suffer, and our willingness to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can reshape entire worlds. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to see beyond the surface to the soul beneath. And sometimes the galaxy learns why you should never ever threaten something a human has decided to protect. The mining station Kepler 442b hung like a metallic spider in the darkness of space, its 8 massive arms extending outward to harvest rare minerals from the asteroid belt that surrounded the distant star. Inside its corridors, the soft padding of Felinian feet echoed against the metal floors as the night shift prepared to begin their duties. Zara crouched in the shadows of Storage Bay 7, her pure white fur almost glowing in the dim emergency lighting. She pressed her 3 newborn kittens closer to her chest, their tiny mewling barely audible above the hum of the station's life support systems. Her pink eyes darted nervously toward the entrance, watching for any sign of the other workers who might discover her hiding place. Being an albino among the Felinians was more than just a genetic rarity. It was a curse that had followed her throughout her entire life. The deep golden and striped patterns that marked a true Felinian were absent from her pale form, replaced instead by the white fur and pink eyes that her people had feared for generations. According to ancient Felinian lore, albinos brought misfortune to any group that accepted them. Ships would malfunction, equipment would fail, and accidents would claim the lives of good workers. Zara had lived with this superstition her entire adult life, watching as potential mates turned away in disgust, as employers reluctantly hired her only because of labor shortages, and as co-workers whispered behind her back about the disasters that would surely follow in her wake. She had learned to keep her head down, work twice as hard as anyone else, and never ever draw attention to herself. But now she had 3 kittens, and their fur was just as white as hers. The birth had been difficult happening during her shift in the lower mining tunnels where the artificial gravity fluctuated unpredictably. She had managed to deliver them alone, biting down on a maintenance cloth to keep from crying out as her body struggled to bring new life into the harsh environment of the station. The medical bay was out of the question. Doc Vex, the station's chief medical officer, had made it clear on multiple occasions that albino genetics were a contamination that shouldn't be allowed to spread. For the past 3 days, Zara had been living in the storage bay, surviving on stolen nutrition packets and water she siphoned from the maintenance conduits. Her kittens were healthy, but they needed proper food, warmth, and medical attention that she couldn't provide in their current hiding place. Every time she closed her eyes, she could hear their hungry cries growing weaker. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze. Multiple sets of paws were moving down the corridor outside, their gait purposeful and determined. Zara gathered her kittens closer, feeling their tiny bodies trembling against her chest as she pressed herself deeper into the shadows behind a stack of supply containers. "She's got to be somewhere in this section," came the voice of Kron, the station's security chief. His voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "The waste disposal units show someone's been accessing them without authorization, and the water usage in this bay is elevated. Why don't we just seal off the whole section and vent it to space?" suggested another voice, Mira, one of the senior engineers. "It would solve the problem permanently. Because," Kron replied with barely contained patience, "we need to recover the kittens first. They can't be allowed to grow up and spread their curse to other parts of the station." The albino bloodline ends here. Zara's heart hammered in her chest as she listened to them discuss her children as if they were a contamination to be cleaned up. She knew that the Felenian Council had debated what to do about her pregnancy for months, but she had hoped that their basic decency would prevent them from harming newborns. She had been naive. The footsteps grew closer, and Zara could see the beam of a flashlight dancing across the walls of the storage bay. In moments, they would find her hiding place, and then she didn't want to think about what would happen then. Her kitten shifted in her arms, and the smallest one, a female she had secretly named Hope, let out a tiny mew that seemed to echo through the bay like a siren. The footsteps stopped. "Did you hear that?" Kron whispered. "Sector 7 Delta," Mira confirmed. "Behind the atmospheric recycling units." Zara closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. If this was the end, she at least wanted her kittens to know that someone loved them. She began to hum softly, a lullaby her own mother had sung to her before the superstitions had driven them apart. But instead of Felinian voices, what she heard next was something entirely unexpected. "Hey there, folks. You all seem pretty worked up about something. Everything okay?" The voice was deeper than any Felinian's, with a strange accent that made some of the words sound elongated. Zara had heard that accent before, during the brief periods when human ships docked at the station for repairs and resupply. Most Felinians avoided the humans, considering them to be crude and uncivilized, but Zara had always been curious about the species that had somehow managed to earn a reputation for both incredible engineering skills and an almost legendary stubbornness. "This is Felinian business, human," Kron replied, his voice carrying a warning tone. "Move along." "Well, see, that's where we might have a problem," the human replied, and Zara could hear the sound of heavy boots approaching. "Because according to my work order, I'm supposed to be checking the atmospheric recycling units in this bay. Something about unusual power consumption patterns. And it looks like you folks are standing right in my way." "Your work order can wait," Mira interjected. "We're dealing with a security matter." "Security matter, huh?" The human's voice carried a note of casual interest. "What kind of security matter requires 3 armed Felinians to corner someone hiding behind recycling equipment?" There was a long pause, and Zara could practically feel the tension building in the corridor outside her hiding place. She held her breath, wondering if the human would simply back down and leave her to face Kron and his companions alone. "We're hunting down an albino and her spawn," Kron finally said, his voice filled with disgust. "They're a contamination that threatens the safety of everyone on this station." "Spawn?" The human's voice had changed, losing its casual tone and taking on something much harder. "Did you just refer to newborn babies as spawn?" "They're not babies," Mira snapped. "They're genetic aberrations, cursed creatures that bring nothing but misfortune to everyone around them." "I see." The human was quiet for a long moment. "And what exactly do you plan to do with these genetic aberrations once you find them?" "That's not your concern, human." "Actually, I think it is. See, I've got this funny thing about people who threaten children. Doesn't matter what species they are, or what color their fur is, or what superstitions might be floating around. Someone threatens a baby, and suddenly it becomes very much my concern." The sound of footsteps resumed, but now they were moving in the wrong direction. The human was walking away from Zara's hiding place and toward Kron and his companions. "Stand down, human. This is your final warning." "Or what? You'll shoot an unarmed maintenance worker for asking questions? That ought to look great in your incident report." Zara heard the distinctive whine of energy weapons being charged, and her heart sank. The human was trying to help her, and now he was going to be killed for his kindness. She couldn't let that happen. Slowly, carefully, she began to shift her position, preparing to reveal herself and surrender if it meant saving an innocent life. But before she could move, the human's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." "Why?" Kron demanded. "What's a single human going to do against 3 armed Felinians? Me? Nothing much. I'm just a mechanic. But the thing is, I sent out a general distress signal about 30 seconds ago. Standard protocol when someone points weapons at station personnel." And according to my scanner, there are currently 14 humans on this station, including 3 former military who served in the Centauri campaigns. They'll be here in about 90 seconds. You're bluffing. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But are you really willing to bet your careers on it? Because shooting me is one thing, you might be able to explain that away. But when my friends show up and find my body along with evidence that you were hunting down a mother and her babies, well, let's just say that humans have a very particular reputation when it comes to people who hurt children. The silence stretched out for what felt like an eternity. Zara could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, and she realized that her kittens had gone completely still, as if they somehow sensed the danger surrounding them. Finally, Kron spoke. This isn't over, human. We'll find them eventually. Maybe you will, but not today. The sound of footsteps retreating echoed through the corridor, and Zara allowed herself to breathe again. But her relief was short-lived because now she could hear the human's boots approaching her hiding place. Ma'am? His voice was gentle now, almost whisper-soft. I know you're back there, and I know you're scared, but I want you to know that you're safe now. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm not going to hurt you or your babies. Zara remained frozen in place, unsure whether to trust this alien who had just risked his life to protect her. In her experience, kindness always came with a price. I can hear your little ones, Marcus continued. They sound hungry, and I'm betting you could use some food too. When's the last time you had a proper meal? Despite herself, Zara's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, betraying just how desperate her situation had become. She heard a soft chuckle from the human. That's what I thought. Look, I'm going to leave a nutrition pack and some water here by the recycling unit. I'm also going to leave my comm frequency. If you need help, and I mean any kind of help at all, you just call me, okay? Zara heard the sound of items being set down on the metal floor, followed by footsteps moving away. After several minutes of silence, she carefully crept forward and found a sealed nutrition pack, a container of fresh water, and a small communication device. There was also a note written in the common galactic script, your babies deserve better than hiding in storage bays. When you're ready to trust a crazy human with a soft spot for underdogs, call me. I've got a plan. MC. As Zara fed her starving kittens for the first time in days, she found herself staring at the communication device. She had spent her entire life being rejected and cast aside by her own people. The idea that an alien, a human, might actually want to help her was almost too incredible to believe. But as she watched her kittens nurse contentedly for the first time since their birth, she began to think that maybe, just maybe, the humans might be different. Outside the storage bay, the station continued its eternal rotation through space, mining operations proceeding as normal while most of the crew went about their daily routines without any knowledge of the drama that had just played out in their midst. The shift supervisors filed their reports. The engineers monitored their systems, and the security teams continued their patrols. In the human quarters, Marcus Chen sat at his small desk and stared at his communication device, waiting for a signal that might never come. He had been stationed on Kepler Dao 442b for 6 months, long enough to observe the casual cruelty that the Felinians showed toward anyone who didn't meet their standards of genetic perfection. He had seen workers dismissed for minor physical imperfections, heard the whispered conversations about bloodline purity, and witnessed the systematic ostracization of anyone who dared to be different. But threatening babies, that was a line he couldn't let anyone cross. Marcus had grown up in the refugee camps on New Geneva, where humans from a dozen different worlds had been forced to rebuild their lives after the corporate wars. He had seen what happened when people were judged by their appearance rather than their character, and he had sworn long ago that he would never stand by while the innocent suffered. The communication device remained silent. 3 decks below, in Storage Bay 7, Zara held her sleeping kittens and tried to decide whether to trust the kindness of a stranger. Every instinct told her to remain hidden, to avoid drawing attention, to protect her children by keeping them away from everyone else. But her babies were growing weaker every day, and she knew that hiding would only delay the inevitable. Eventually, Kron would find them, and when he did, her kittens would die for the crime of being born with the wrong color fur. Maybe it was time to take a different kind of risk. Zara picked up the communication device and stared at it for a long time. Then, with a deep breath that felt like stepping off a cliff, she activated the connection. "Marcus!" she whispered into the device. The response came immediately, as if he had been waiting by his own communicator. "I'm here. Are you and your babies okay? For now. But I don't know how much longer I can keep hiding." "You don't have to hide anymore. I told you I had a plan, and I meant it. But I'm going to need you to trust me." Zara closed her eyes and felt her kitten's tiny heartbeats against her chest. Trust was a luxury she had never been able to afford, but what choice did she have? "What do you need me to do?" "Meet me in Maintenance Bay 12 in 1 hour, and bring your babies. It's time to get you all somewhere safe." As Zara gathered her few possessions and prepared to venture out of her hiding place, she couldn't help but wonder what kind of plan a human mechanic could possibly have that would protect her from the systematic prejudice, but for the first time in days, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. The station's lights dimmed as the night cycle began, and throughout the corridors, the Felinian workers settled into their routines without any idea that their rigid world was about to be challenged by the simple act of one species showing kindness to another. In the depths of space, change often comes not from grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but from small moments of compassion between unlikely allies. And sometimes the most powerful revolution begins with nothing more than a maintenance worker who refuses to let children suffer in silence. Maintenance Bay 12 was located in the oldest section of Kepler 442b, where the original construction crews had built the station's core systems nearly a century ago. The corridors here were narrower, the lighting dimmer, and the constant hum of machinery provided a natural cover for conversations that needed to remain private. Zara made her way through the twisting passages with her kittens bundled against her chest, every shadow making her heart race with the fear that Kron might be lurking around the next corner. She had waited until the shift change to minimize her chances of being spotted, but she still felt exposed and vulnerable as she navigated the station's service tunnels. Marcus was already waiting when she arrived, standing beside an open maintenance panel with a toolkit spread out on a nearby workbench. He was taller than she had expected, with the kind of sturdy build that suggested years of physical labor. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and his hands bore the calluses and small scars that marked a lifetime of working with machinery. When he saw her emerge from the shadows, his expression softened with genuine relief. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said quietly, setting down his tools and turning to face her fully. "I wasn't sure either," Zara admitted, clutching her kittens tighter. Now that she was face to face with a human who had risked his safety for her, she felt overwhelmed by uncertainty. What if this was all an elaborate trap? What if he intended to turn her over to station security himself? But Marcus seemed to understand her hesitation. Instead of approaching her, he remained by the workbench and spoke in the same gentle tone he had used earlier. "Would you like to sit down? There's a tool crate over there that's pretty comfortable, and I imagine you're tired." The simple consideration in his voice made Zara's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. When was the last time someone had shown concern for her comfort? She moved carefully to the indicated crate and settled onto its padded surface, adjusting her position so that her kittens remained secure. "They're beautiful," Marcus said, and there was no trace of the disgust or fear that usually colored people's voices when they spoke about her children. "How old are they?" 4 days, Zara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The smallest one is Hope. The other 2, I haven't named them yet." I didn't want to get too attached in case she couldn't finish the sentence, but Marcus nodded with understanding, in case you couldn't protect them. "I get it. But you don't have to worry about that anymore. I told you I had a plan, and I meant it." "What kind of plan could possibly work against the entire station hierarchy?" Zara asked, finally voicing the question that had been gnawing at her since their first communication. "You're one human among hundreds of Felenians who want my children dead. Marcus smiled, and there was something in his expression that made Zara think of the predatory confidence she had seen in the station's security footage of wild animals hunting their prey. Except this time, she had the distinct impression that she and her kittens were not the prey. "That's where you're wrong about something important," he said, moving to the workbench and pulling out a tablet display. "I'm not alone. Humans have a saying, nobody messes with our kids. And once word gets out about what's happening here, that protection extends to anyone we consider part of our pack." He activated the tablet and showed her a series of communication logs. Zara's pink eyes widened as she realized what she was looking at. "You contacted other humans? Every human ship captain within 3 systems, plus the Colonial Administration Office on New Geneva and the Human Welfare Commission on Tau Ceti. I also sent copies to some very influential human journalists who specialize in interspecies relations." Zara stared at the screen, trying to process the implications of what Marcus had done. "But why? You barely know me." "My people consider me cursed. Why would you risk creating an interspecies incident over one albino and her kittens?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. "Because I know what it's like to be different. I grew up in the refugee camps after the corporate wars, where human children were sorted into categories based on their genetic profiles, their family histories, and their potential economic value. The strong ones got adopted by wealthy families on the core worlds. The smart ones got scholarships to technical academies. And the rest of us, we learned to survive on scraps and kindness from strangers." He moved closer, but stopped when he saw Zara tense up. "I was one of the lucky ones. A maintenance supervisor named Elena Rodriguez took a chance on a scrawny kid with no family and taught me everything I know about keeping machines running. She used to say that the measure of a civilization wasn't how they treated their strongest members, but how they protected their most vulnerable ones." Zara looked down at her sleeping kittens, trying to understand the emotions that were stirring in her chest. Hope, the smallest of the 3, had wrapped her tiny paws around one of Zara's fingers, and the sight made her heart ache with protective love. "What exactly did you tell these other humans?" she asked. Marcus consulted his tablet. "The truth. That station security is planning to harm 3 newborn kittens because of an ancient superstition about fur color, that a mother is being forced to hide in storage bays because her own people want to kill her children." "And they believed you?" "They believed me, but more importantly, they're angry. Really, really angry. Captain Sarah Kim is diverting her cargo hauler to arrive here in 18 hours. Commander Rodriguez, Elena's daughter, actually, is bringing a full diplomatic escort from the Human Colonial Authority. And Dr. James Park, who runs the Interspecies Medical Research Station at Wolf 359, is coming personally to examine your kittens and document their health." Zara felt dizzy as she tried to process this information. "You've started a diplomatic crisis. I've prevented an atrocity," Marcus corrected firmly. "There's a difference." Before Zara could respond, the communication panel on Marcus's tablet chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at the screen and his expression grew serious. "We might have a problem. Station Administrator Talks is calling an emergency meeting of all department heads. The topic is listed as contamination protocols." Zara's blood ran cold. Administrator Talks was a traditional Felinian who had made his views on genetic purity very clear during his tenure on the station. If he was implementing contamination protocols, it could only mean one thing. "They're going to start a systematic search," she whispered. "Room by room, bay by bay, until they find us. Then we need to move faster than I planned." Marcus began gathering his tools with efficient precision. "I was hoping to wait until the human ships arrived, but if they're starting active sweeps, we need to get you and your baby somewhere they can't reach you." "Where?" Zara asked desperately. "There's nowhere on this station that Talks doesn't have access to." Marcus paused in his packing and looked at her with an expression that was equal parts determination and mischief. "Actually, there is one place, but you're not going to like it. Tell me, The human quarters are technically considered sovereign territory under the Interspecies Cooperation Accords. As long as you're there as my invited guest, station security can't touch you without causing a major diplomatic incident. Zara stared at him in disbelief. You want me to hide in the human residential section? With my babies? I want you to claim sanctuary in the human residential section. There's a legal difference, and it's one that Administrator Talks will have to respect whether he likes it or not. But the other humans, won't they object to having Felinians in their living space? Marcus's smile returned, and this time it was genuinely warm. Zara, you're about to learn something important about human nature. We can be stubborn, argumentative, and absolutely impossible to deal with when we think we're right. But when someone needs help, especially when children are involved, we circle the wagons and dare anyone to try getting through us. The sound of marching feet echoed from the corridor outside, and Marcus quickly shut down his tablet and shouldered his toolkit. That's our cue to leave. Stay close to me, and if anyone stops us, let me do the talking. As they made their way through the maintenance corridors toward the human residential section, Zara found herself struggling to understand the magnitude of what was happening. In the space of a few hours, her entire world had shifted from one of hopeless desperation to something that felt almost like hope. But could she really trust these humans to protect her and her children? And what would happen when the inevitable confrontation came between human diplomatic authority and Felinian station command? The corridor ahead branched into two directions, and Marcus chose the path that led deeper into the station's inhabited areas. As they walked, Zara became aware of the subtle changes in her surroundings. The walls here were painted in warmer colors, and she could detect the faint sounds of conversation and activity from behind closed doors. Just so you know, Marcus said quietly as they approached a security checkpoint, the next few minutes might be a little intense, but I need you to trust me. The checkpoint was manned by a single Felinian security officer who looked up from his display screen as they approached. His yellow eyes immediately focused on Zara and her bundle of kittens, and his hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. Halt! Identity verification required. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between the guard and Zara. Marcus Chen, Human Maintenance Division. This is my guest, and we're heading to the human residential section. Negative. All non-essential movement has been suspended pending completion of security sweeps. Return to your quarters immediately. I'm afraid that's not going to work for us, Marcus replied, his tone remaining conversational despite the tension in the air. Under Article 15 of the Interspecies Cooperation Accords, I have the right to escort invited guests to sovereign human territory without interference from local security forces. The guard's expression darkened. That authority does not extend to harboring fugitives. What crime has my guest committed?
Unauthorized breeding, genetic contamination,
violation of public health protocols. Marcus was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a dangerous edge. Officer, are you telling me that this station considers pregnancy to be a crime? When the offspring pose a threat to station safety, yes. I see. And what specific threat do 3 newborn kittens pose to a space station with a complement of over 800 personnel? The guard seemed to realize that he was being maneuvered into an uncomfortable position, but he pressed on anyway. Albino genetics carry the curse of misfortune. Their presence on this station endangers everyone. The curse of misfortune. Marcus nodded slowly. That's fascinating. Can you show me the scientific documentation that supports this claim? I'd love to see the peer-reviewed studies that prove fur color has any correlation with equipment failure rates. This is not a matter for debate, human. Stand aside. Actually, it is a matter for debate, because in about 17 hours, this conversation is going to be replayed for Captain Sarah Kim, Commander Rodriguez, and a full diplomatic review board. And they're going to want to know why station security was threatening to kill babies because of an ancient superstition. The standoff stretched out for several tense seconds with neither male willing to back down. Then the guard's communication device crackled to life. All security personnel to level 7. Immediate response required. The guard glanced at his comm, then back at Marcus and Zara. Finally, with obvious reluctance, he stepped aside. This isn't over, he warned. No, Marcus agreed. I don't think it is. As they passed through the checkpoint and entered the human residential section, Zara felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere around them. The corridors here were wider, the lighting warmer, and the air carried the sense of cooking, food, and living spaces that were actually lived in rather than simply occupied. Welcome to Human Town, Marcus said, leading her down a corridor lined with doors marked with names rather than numbers. Population? 14 humans, 1 very confused maintenance android, and as of right now, 1 Felinian mother and her 3 beautiful babies. They stopped at a door marked Chen, M Senior Maintenance Specialist, and Marcus activated the entry panel. Home sweet home, he said, ushering her inside. Zara stepped into Marcus's quarters and immediately noticed the difference between human and Felinian living spaces. Where Felinian quarters were sparse and functional, Marcus's home was filled with personal items, photographs, books, small mechanical devices, and what appeared to be handcrafted decorations made from salvaged materials. The couch converts to a bed, Marcus explained, moving to clear some space. The kitchen is stocked with standard nutrition packs, but I can probably scrounge up something more palatable for nursing mothers. And that door leads to the bathroom. Full facilities, including a sonic shower if you need to clean up. Zara sank onto the couch, still holding her kittens protectively. The softness of the furniture was a shock after days of sleeping on metal floors and storage containers. Marcus, she said quietly, why are you doing this? Really? Not the philosophical answer about protecting children, but the personal reason. What's in this for you? Marcus sat down across from her, his expression growing serious. Honestly, nothing. Helping you is probably going to cost me my job, might get me banned from Felinian space, and will definitely make my life more complicated in about a dozen different ways. Then, why? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Because when I was 8 years old, I watched a group of adults debate whether or not to euthanize the defective children in our refugee camp. We were costing too much to feed, taking up too much space, and some of the colony administrators thought it would be more efficient to start over with healthier stock. Zara's breath caught in her throat. What happened? A maintenance worker named Elena Rodriguez stood up in that meeting and told them that if they wanted to hurt children, they'd have to go through her first. Then she walked out, went to the children's barracks, and started handing out makeshift weapons to anyone old enough to hold them. Marcus looked up at Zara, and she could see the echo of that 8-year-old boy in his eyes. She saved my life that day, and the lives of 47 other kids who were considered disposable. And she taught me something important. Sometimes the most ordinary people have to stand up and do extraordinary things, because if they don't, nobody else will. Outside the quarters, the station continued its routines, but beneath the surface, forces were already in motion that would change everything. In the administrative offices, emergency meetings were being called. In the communication centers, urgent messages were being sent across the galaxy. And in the depths of space, human ships were adjusting their courses and preparing for a confrontation that would test the very foundations of interspecies cooperation. But in Marcus Chen's quarters, a Felinian mother named Zara held her sleeping kittens and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe was not as cruel as she had always believed. The revolution that would change everything had begun not with grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but with one human mechanic who refused to let children die for the crime of being different. And as the station's lights dimmed for the night cycle, Hope, the smallest of the 3 albino kittens, opened her tiny pink eyes and looked directly at Marcus, as if she somehow understood that her life, and the lives of countless others like her, would never be the same. The emergency session of the Kepler 442b Administrative Council convened at 0400 hour station time, when the corridors were empty and the chances of unwanted observation were minimal. Administrator Talks presided over the meeting from his position at the head of the polished metal table, his gold and black striped fur immaculately groomed despite the early hour. Around him sat the department heads who controlled every aspect of life on the station. Security Chief Kron delivered his report with military precision, his voice carrying the frustration of someone unaccustomed to being thwarted. The albino female and her offspring have not been located despite comprehensive sweeps of all storage and maintenance areas. However, we have confirmed that she has made contact with human personnel. Specifically? Tox inquired, his amber eyes reflecting the cold light of the conference room displays. Marcus Chen, Senior Maintenance Specialist, Human Division. Security footage shows him interfering with our initial apprehension attempt, and communication logs indicate ongoing contact between them. Dr. Vex, the station's chief medical officer, leaned forward in his chair. His white fur bore the distinctive silver markings that indicated advanced medical training among the Felinians, and his voice carried the authority of scientific expertise. Administrator, I must emphasize the critical nature of this situation. We're not simply dealing with aesthetic genetic variation. Albinism in Felinians is associated with numerous physiological abnormalities that could compromise station safety. Visual impairment, neurological instabilities, immune system deficiencies. Those are medical concerns. My primary worry is the documented correlation between albino presence and equipment malfunctions. The mining equipment in Sector 7 has experienced a 12% increase in failure rates since the female was assigned to that section. Thox nodded slowly, though privately he wondered if the equipment failures might have more to do with Mira's reluctance to properly maintain machinery operated by someone she considered cursed. What is the current status of the human interference? Kron's jaw tightened. Chan has transported the albino and her offspring to the human residential section. They are claiming diplomatic sanctuary under the Interspecies Cooperation Accords. Impossible, Doctor. Vex snapped. The Accords do not provide sanctuary for genetic aberrations. Actually, said legal advisor Fex, speaking up from the far end of the table, the Accords are quite specific about the protection of refugees fleeing persecution. If the humans can demonstrate that the subjects are being threatened because of genetic characteristics beyond their control, they may have legitimate grounds for sanctuary. The room fell silent as the implications of this statement settled over the assembled department heads. Finally, Administrator Tox spoke. Are you telling me that we cannot retrieve our own station personnel from human quarters? I'm telling you that attempting to do so by force could trigger a diplomatic crisis that would bring scrutiny we cannot afford. The Human Colonial Authority takes a very dim view of genetic discrimination, and they have the economic and military power to enforce their displeasure. Thox stood and moved to the large viewport that dominated one wall of the conference room. Outside, the asteroid field glittered with the lights of automated mining drones, each one representing millions of credits in rare mineral extraction. The station's entire economy depended on maintaining smooth operations and avoiding the kind of attention that might bring unwanted oversight. What do we know about this Marcus Chen? Maintenance specialist, 15 years experience, clean employment record. Kron replied. But he's also a veteran of the corporate wars, and his psychological profile indicates a strong protective instinct regarding what he perceives as injustice. In other words, Mira added with obvious distaste, he's one of those humans who thinks they know better than everyone else. The question is not what he thinks, Tox said quietly. The question is what he's prepared to do about it. As if summoned by their conversation, Tox's communication console chimed with an incoming priority message. The administrator frowned as he read the transmission details. We're receiving a formal diplomatic communication from the Human Colonial Authority vessel Rising Phoenix currently en route to our coordinates. Estimated arrival time, 14 hours, 30 to 7 minutes. Dr. Vex hissed through his teeth. This situation is escalating beyond our ability to contain it. Perhaps, Thox replied, but we still have options. Legal advisor Fex, what would be the consequences if we were to experience a life support malfunction in the human residential section? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Fex spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Administrator, are you suggesting that we deliberately endanger the lives of innocent personnel? I'm exploring all possible scenarios for resolving this crisis before it damages our operational capacity. The death of 14 humans would trigger a full military investigation by the Colonial Authority. They would dismantle this station bolt by bolt and prosecute everyone involved under interspecies warfare statutes. Chief Engineer Mira nodded grimly, And that's assuming the accident killed everyone. If even one human survived to report what really happened, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood the reputation humans had earned during the corporate wars for ruthless retaliation against those who harmed their people. Then we need to find another approach, Talks concluded. Ideas? We could file a formal complaint with the colonial authorities, suggested Vex. Claim that the humans are harboring station personnel without proper authorization, which would require us to explain why we want those personnel returned, Crone pointed out, and any honest explanation would expose our genetic purity policies to human scrutiny. Dr. Vex cleared his throat. There might be another option. If I were to examine the kittens and find evidence of genetic abnormalities that pose a genuine medical threat to station personnel, not superstition but actual science, then we could argue for quarantine protocols. Could you find such evidence? Thox asked. Administrator, I am a physician. My oath requires me to provide honest medical assessments based on observable facts. That wasn't what I asked. The two Felinians stared at each other across the table, the weight of unspoken implications hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Dr. Vex looked away. I would need to examine the subjects personally to make any determination about their medical status. Which brings us back to the same problem, Kron said. They're under human protection. Administrator Talks returned to his seat and activated his personal communication console. Then we'll have to convince the humans to allow a medical examination, record a formal message for transmission to the Rising Phoenix. The recording light activated and Tacos composed his expression into one of reasonable concern. Captain Kim, I understand you have concerns about the treatment of certain station personnel. I want to assure you that Kepler prefaces under strict adherence to all interspecies protocols and accords. However, we do have legitimate medical concerns about the health status of the individuals currently under human protection. I am formally requesting permission to conduct a standard medical examination to ensure that no contagious conditions exist that might endanger the general station population. I believe this represents a reasonable compromise that addresses both human concerns about welfare and our legitimate health and safety protocols. He ended the recording and looked around the table. If the humans refuse, they appear obstructionist. If they agree, we have access to the subjects. And if Dr. Vex's examination reveals no medical problems, Vex asked quietly, then we'll deal with that situation when it arises. Meanwhile, in the human residential section, Marcus was discovering that news traveled fast through the small community of humans stationed on Kepler 442b. He had barely finished explaining the situation to his immediate neighbors when word began spreading through the interconnected common areas and communication channels that linked the human quarters. The first to arrive was Dr. Susan Martinez, the human medical specialist who maintained the health monitoring systems for human personnel. She knocked softly on Marcus's door at 0500 hours, carrying a medical kit and wearing an expression of grim determination. I heard we have some patients who might need attention, she said without preamble. Zara looked up nervously from the couch where she had been feeding her kittens, unsure how this new human would react to her presence. Dr. King Martinez, Marcus said by way of introduction. Meet Zara and her 3 beautiful babies. Susan approached slowly, her movements careful and non-threatening. As a medical professional, she had worked with dozens of different species, but she had never seen Felinian kittens this young. May I examine them? She asked Zara directly. I want to make sure they're developing normally and that you're recovering well from the birth. The question of trust arose again, but something in the human female's manner convinced Zara to nod her consent. Susan's examination was thorough but gentle, her experienced hands checking reflexes, respiratory function, and basic neurological responses. They're perfect, she announced after completing her assessment. All 3 are healthy, well-proportioned, and developing exactly as they should. The albinism appears to be purely cosmetic. There are no associated health problems that I can detect. You're certain? Zara asked, hardly daring to hope. I've examined Felinian physiology for 7 years. These kittens are as healthy as any I've ever seen. More humans began arriving as the morning shift change approached. Engineer Pavel Kowalski brought coffee and fresh nutrition packs. Communications specialist Lisa Park arrived with updates on the approaching diplomatic ships. Senior technician James Wright brought tools and electronic equipment for reasons that weren't immediately clear to anyone. Within 2 hours, Marcus's quarters had been transformed into an informal command center, with humans coming and going as they coordinated their response to what they had unanimously decided was an unacceptable threat to innocent children. "The Rising Phoenix is making better time than expected," Lisa reported, checking her communication console. "Captain Kim has pushed her engines to maximum sustainable speed. New ETA is 11 hours, 43 minutes. Any word from Administrator Talks?" Pavel asked. "He's requesting permission to conduct a medical examination of our guests," Marcus replied, reading from his own communication device. "Says he's concerned about contagious conditions." Dr. Martinez snorted in disgust. "What contagious conditions?" "I've run full-spectrum scans on all 4 of them. They're healthier than half the Felinians on this station." "It's a pretext," James said, looking up from the electronic device he was assembling. "They want access so they can claim there's a medical emergency that requires immediate intervention." "What are you building there?" Marcus asked, noting the growing complexity of James's project. "Insurance. If they try to force their way in here, I want to make sure we have a complete record of everything that happens. This little beauty will record and automatically transmit everything to every human ship within communication range." Zara listened to this conversation with growing amazement. These humans, who had known her for less than a day, were organizing themselves into a protective unit with the efficiency of a military operation, and they were doing it not for personal gain or political advantage, but simply because they believed it was the right thing to do. "I don't understand," she said quietly, causing the conversation to stop. "Why are you all doing this?" "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why risk your careers and your safety for one Felinian and her kittens?" The humans exchanged glances, and it was Dr. Martinez who answered. "Because we're parents too," she said simply. "Pavel has 2 daughters on New Geneva. Lisa has a son studying at the Technical Academy on Tau Ceti. James has twin boys in the Colonial Service. And Marcus, well, Marcus sees himself in every kid who's ever been told they don't matter. But it's more than that," Pavel added. "We're human. It's what we do. Show us someone who's hurting, someone who can't fight back, someone who needs protection, and we stop being individuals and start being a pack, and nobody messes with the pack." Outside in the corridor, the sound of approaching footsteps announced the arrival of additional visitors. The door chimed, and Marcus activated the security monitor to see Security Chief Kron standing in the hallway with 2 armed officers. "Gentlemen," Marcus said through the communication system, "what can I do for you?" "We're here to collect station personnel who are absent from their assigned duties," Kron replied formally. "I'm afraid my guests aren't available for collection at this time. They're under human protection. Your protection has no legal standing. Stand aside." Marcus looked around at his fellow humans, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces. "Actually, our protection has every legal standing under the Interspecies Cooperation Accords, and I'm afraid we're not inclined to stand aside." Through the monitor, they could see Kron's frustration building. "We have the authority to enter human quarters if we suspect criminal activity." "What crime?" Dr. Martinez called out, moving to stand beside Marcus at the communication panel. "Being born with the wrong color fur? Last I checked, genetics weren't a criminal matter under galactic law. Unauthorized absence from duty assignments. Violation of station health protocols. Genetic contamination." James Wright activated his recording device and aimed it at the security monitor. "For the record, you just stated that this station considers genetic characteristics to be grounds for criminal charges. I'm sure the Human Colonial Authority will find that very interesting." The standoff continued for several minutes, with neither side willing to back down. Finally, Kron spoke again. "This matter will be resolved shortly. Do not leave your quarters." The security team departed, but the threat lingered in the air like smoke. "They'll be back," Lisa said quietly, "and next time they'll bring more firepower." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we better be ready for them." As the humans began making preparations for what seemed like an inevitable confrontation, Zara held her kittens closer and marveled at the transformation that had overtaken her life. 24 hours ago, she had been alone, desperate, and convinced that her children would die because of the hatred and superstition of her own people. Now she was surrounded by aliens who had claimed her as family, who spoke of protecting her babies as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. She didn't fully understand the forces that drove human behavior, but she was beginning to realize that she had stumbled into something remarkable, a species that defined itself not by what it rejected, but by what it was willing to fight for. In the depths of space, the rising Phoenix continued its high-speed approach, its captain preparing for a confrontation that would test the very foundations of interspecies diplomacy. Other ships were adjusting their courses as well, drawn by the rapidly spreading news of a human protective action in defense of innocent children. The storm was rising, and at its center sat a small albino kitten named Hope, unaware that her very existence was about to change the course of galactic history. Captain Sarah Kim stood on the bridge of the rising Phoenix watching the distant lights of Kepler 442b grow larger on the main display screen. Her ship was still 8 hours out, but long-range communications had been buzzing with updates from the mining station that made her increasingly concerned about what they would find upon arrival. "Captain!" called Lieutenant Commander Torres from the communications station. "We're receiving another transmission from Administrator Tox. He's requesting immediate communication with you personally." Sarah had been avoiding direct contact with the station administrator, preferring to gather information from other sources while keeping her own intentions unclear. But with the situation apparently escalating, perhaps it was time for some direct diplomacy. "Put him through." The main screen shifted to display the formal conference room of Kepler 442b's administrative center. Administrator Tox appeared composed and reasonable, his groomed appearance and careful posture suggesting someone accustomed to dealing with difficult situations through negotiation rather than force. "Captain Kim, thank you for accepting my communication. I believe there may be some misunderstanding about the situation here that we can resolve through direct discussion." Administrator Tox: "I'm listening. The individuals currently under human protection are station personnel who have abandoned their duty assignments without authorization. While we understand and respect human concerns about welfare, we also have legitimate operational requirements that must be met." Sarah's expression remained neutral. "What kind of operational requirements involve newborn babies?" The subjects in question represent potential health and safety risks that require proper medical evaluation. We have offered to conduct this evaluation under neutral observation, but the humans on your station have refused to allow our medical personnel access. Why would our people refuse medical evaluation? Tox paused for a moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Captain, I believe your personnel may have been provided with incomplete or biased information about our policies regarding genetic diversity. We operate under strict scientific protocols, not superstition or prejudice." From her position at the navigation console, Lieutenant Commander Chen, no relation to Marcus, looked up with a skeptical expression. Sarah had served with Chen for 6 years, and she trusted the woman's judgment about people implicitly. "Administrator, help me understand something. If this is simply a matter of medical evaluation, why have your security forces been conducting armed searches for a mother and her newborn children? Standard protocols for locating missing personnel." The subjects were not in their assigned quarters and had not reported to medical for their scheduled postnatal examination. "I see. And the statements recorded by our personnel about threats to harm these children? Misunderstandings, I assure you. Translation difficulties, perhaps, or cultural differences in how we express concern for safety." Sarah nodded slowly, but her eyes remained hard. "Administrator, I'm going to be very direct with you. If we arrive at your station and discover that any harm has come to these children or their mother, the consequences will be severe. The human colonial authority takes a very dim view of threats against innocents regardless of the species involved. Captain, I can assure you that no harm will come to anyone under our protection." We simply ask for the opportunity to resolve this matter through proper channels before it becomes unnecessarily complicated.
It's already complicated, Administrator.
See you in 8 hours. Sarah terminated the communication and turned to her bridge crew. Analysis. He's lying through his teeth, Lieutenant Commander Chen said immediately. Everything about his body language suggests someone trying to manage a crisis rather than resolve a misunderstanding. Agreed, added Torres. The communication logs we've received from Marcus Chen include recorded statements that directly contradict everything Tox just told us. Sarah moved to her command chair and activated the ship's internal communication system. We are approaching what may be a hostile situation involving threats to human-protected civilians. I want all departments at readiness condition yellow until further notice. Department heads report to the conference room in 30 minutes for mission briefing. Back on Kepler. 442B. The human residential section had taken on the atmosphere of a fortress under siege. The 14 human residents had organized themselves into a protective perimeter around Marcus's quarters, with makeshift barriers blocking the corridor approaches and communication equipment monitoring all station frequencies. Dr. Martinez had established a medical station in Pavel's quarters next door, ready to provide emergency treatment if the situation turned violent. Engineer Kowalski had rigged the environmental controls to provide immediate lockdown capability if needed, and James Wright's recording equipment had been expanded into a comprehensive surveillance network that captured every approach to the human section.
They're massing security personnel on Level 5, reported Lisa Park from her communication station.
I count at least 20 armed guards, plus what looks like emergency medical equipment. Marcus looked up from the tactical display he had been studying. Emergency medical equipment, quarantine containment units, trauma stretchers, that sort of thing. They're planning to claim a medical emergency, Dr. Martinez said grimly, probably going to stage some kind of incident that requires immediate intervention. Zara, who had been listening to this conversation while nursing her kittens, felt a chill run through her. She had lived her entire life under Felinian authority, and she understood how easily the truth could be manipulated when those in power wanted a particular outcome. What kind of incident? She asked quietly. Could be anything, Marcus replied. Contamination alert, medical emergency equipment malfunction, whatever gives them an excuse to enter human quarters by force. Can they do that? Technically, yes. Emergency protocols override diplomatic immunity in cases of immediate danger to station personnel. But we'd record everything, James added, patting his surveillance equipment. Even if they succeed in taking you and the babies, the evidence would be transmitted automatically to every human ship in the sector. Zara hugged her kittens closer, trying to process the implications of what she was hearing. You're saying they might be willing to create an international incident just to get rid of 3 newborn babies? People do terrible things when they're convinced they're protecting something important, Dr. Martinez said sadly. And if they believe the superstitions about albino genetics, they might see your children as an existential threat to the entire station. The communication console chimed with an incoming message, and Lisa quickly routed it to the main display. Administrator Tox appeared on the screen, his expression grave with apparent concern. Attention human personnel. We have detected atmospheric anomalies in your residential section that may indicate a biological contamination event. For your safety and the safety of all station personnel, we are implementing emergency quarantine protocols effective immediately. Medical personnel will be entering your section in 10 minutes to conduct necessary health assessments. The transmission ended, leaving the humans staring at each other in disbelief. Atmospheric anomalies? Pavel said incredulously. I've been monitoring our environmental systems continuously. There are no anomalies. It's a fabrication, Marcus confirmed, checking his own readings. Every system shows green across the board. Here they come, James announced, watching his security monitors. Full quarantine team, armed escort, medical containment units, the whole package. Martinez quickly gathered her medical equipment and moved to join the group in Marcus's quarters. If they're claiming biological contamination, they'll want to separate us for individual examination. Once they have us isolated, they can claim anything. What do we do? Lisa asked. Marcus looked around at his fellow humans, seeing fear and determination in equal measure on their faces. Then he looked at Zara. who was holding her babies with the desperate protectiveness of a mother who had run out of places to run. "We stand our ground," he said simply. "Whatever happens, we don't let them separate us, and we don't let them take the babies." "Marcus," Dr. Martinez said quietly, "if they're willing to fabricate a medical emergency, they might be willing to use force to back it up. People could get hurt. People are already being hurt," he replied, looking directly at Zara. "The question is whether we're going to let it continue or whether we're going to take a stand." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor, accompanied by the mechanical hum of medical equipment being wheeled into position. Through the security monitors, they could see figures in full environmental suits assembling outside the human residential section. "Final approach," James reported. 26 personnel total, including medical, security, and what looks like a full decontamination team. The door chimed and Dr. Vex's voice came through the communication system, distorted by his environmental suit's speakers. "Human personnel, this is Chief Medical Officer Vex. We are implementing emergency health protocols due to detected biological contamination in your residential section. You will exit your quarters immediately for medical evaluation and decontamination processing." Marcus activated the response system. "Dr. Vex, this is Marcus Chen. We're reading normal atmospheric conditions on all our monitoring equipment. Can you specify the nature of the contamination you've detected?" "Airborne pathogens consistent with zoonotic transmission from non-standard genetic variants. Immediate isolation is required to prevent station-wide infection." Dr. Martinez moved to her own communication panel. "Dr. Vex, this is Dr. Susan Martinez, Human Medical Division. I've conducted comprehensive health screenings of all personnel in this section within the past 6 hours. No pathogenic organisms were detected. Human medical equipment may not be calibrated to detect Felinian-specific biological hazards. Stand aside and allow proper medical evaluation." "I'm afraid we can't do that," Marcus replied. "Our monitoring equipment shows no contamination, our medical personnel have confirmed no health risks, and we have reason to believe this is a fabricated emergency." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Finally, Dr. Vex spoke again. "You are endangering the lives of 800 station personnel by refusing to comply with emergency health protocols. This is your final opportunity to cooperate voluntarily, and if we refuse, then we will be forced to implement emergency containment procedures for the safety of everyone aboard this station." Through the security monitors, the humans could see the armed security personnel moving into position around their residential section. The medical team began setting up containment equipment, while technicians started connecting what appeared to be atmospheric processing units to the corridor ventilation systems. "They're going to flood the corridors with some kind of gas," Pavel realized. "Probably something that will knock us out so they can enter without resistance." "Can we seal our quarters?" Dr. Martinez asked. "For a while," Pavel replied, "but not indefinitely, and if they're determined to get in, there are a dozen different ways they can breach our defenses." Zara looked around at the humans who had risked everything to protect her and her children, and she felt an overwhelming sense of guilt at the danger she had brought upon them. "Maybe I should surrender," she said quietly. "If I go with them willingly, they might leave you alone." "No," Marcus said immediately, "that's not going to happen. But you've done so much already. You've given me hope, shown me kindness, protected my babies when no one else would. I can't let you be hurt because of me." Dr. Martinez knelt beside Zara's chair. "Listen to me. If we let them take you now, they'll claim their fabricated medical emergency was justified. It will set a precedent that any station administrator can use to override human protection just by claiming a health crisis. But what about your safety?" "Our safety depends on not letting bullies win," Pavel said firmly. "If we back down now, every human in this sector becomes vulnerable to the same tactics." The communication console crackled to life again, and this time it was Security Chief Kron's voice. "Human personnel have 30 seconds to evacuate their quarters voluntarily. After that time, we will begin emergency atmospheric modification to ensure compliance with quarantine protocols." Marcus looked around at his friends and colleagues, seeing the same determination he felt reflected in their faces. All right, people, this is it. Remember, whatever happens, we stay together, we protect the babies, and we make sure everything is recorded. James activated his emergency transmission protocols, ensuring that every word and image would be broadcast live to the Rising Phoenix and any other human ships within communication range. "Broadcasting now," he announced. "The whole galaxy is watching." Through the security monitors, they could see the Felinian personnel making final preparations for their assault on the human residential section. Environmental suits were sealed, weapons were checked, and containment equipment was activated. In her arms, Hope began to cry, a tiny, plaintive sound that seemed to echo through the corridors with heartbreaking vulnerability. Zara gently rocked her daughter, humming the same lullaby she had sung in the storage bay that now seemed like a lifetime ago. "It's gonna be okay, little one," she whispered. "These humans won't let anyone hurt you." Outside in the corridor, the countdown reached 0, and the attack began. But 8 hours away and closing fast, Captain Sarah Kim watched the live feed from the mining station and felt the cold fury that had made her legendary during the corporate wars beginning to build in her chest. The storm was about to break, and the galaxy was about to learn why threatening human-protected children was considered one of the most dangerous mistakes anyone could make. The gas began seeping into the corridor outside the human quarters at exactly 13:47 hours station time, a colorless vapor that the Felinian medical team assured Administrator Tox would render the humans unconscious within minutes without causing permanent harm. Through the security monitors, Marcus and the others watched as the environmental modification equipment pumped the sleeping agent through the ventilation systems. "Sealing internal atmosphere," Pavel announced, his fingers flying over the environmental controls. "I can give us maybe 20 minutes of clean air, but after that, we improvise," Marcus replied grimly, checking the seal on his emergency respirator. Through James's communication equipment, they could hear Captain Kim's voice crackling over the long-range transmission from the Rising Phoenix. "Marcus, this is Captain Kim. We're monitoring your situation. Hold your position. We are 7 hours, 14 minutes out and approaching at maximum speed." "Roger that, Captain," Marcus replied. "We'll do our best to keep things interesting until you arrive." The first sign that something was going wrong with the Felinian plan came when Dr. Bex's voice crackled over the communication system, no longer confident and authoritative, but confused and concerned.
The atmospheric modification isn't working as expected.
The humans appear to have sealed their environmental systems. "How is that possible?" Administrator Tox demanded from his position in the command center, watching the operation through multiple security feeds. "Human quarters have independent life support systems," Chief Engineer Mira replied reluctantly. "It's a standard safety feature in case of main system failures." "Then override the independent systems." "Sir, that would require us to actually breach the quarters physically. Once we do that, we can't claim this is simply a medical emergency." Tox stared at the security monitors, watching the humans moving calmly through their sealed quarters while his expensive gas attack accomplished nothing. Around him, the department heads, who had seemed so confident about their plan, now appeared increasingly nervous about the implications of what they were attempting. "Sir," Legal Advisor Fex said quietly, "we're receiving communication requests from 17 different human ships. Word of this incident has spread throughout the sector. Ignore them." "Sir, one of those ships is the human heavy cruiser Indomitable. Captain Morrison is requesting immediate communication with you personally." Administrator Tox felt a chill run through his fur. The Indomitable was one of the human colonial authority's most powerful warships, and Captain Morrison had a reputation for aggressive protection of human interests that bordered on the legendary. "How far out is the Indomitable?" 36 hours at current speed, but Captain Morrison has announced that they are proceeding to emergency acceleration. New ETA, 18 hours. The mathematics of the situation were becoming increasingly clear to Talks. What had begun as a simple, internal matter was rapidly escalating into a major diplomatic crisis with potentially devastating consequences for the station's operations. Security Chief Kron, implement breach protocols. I want those quarters opened and the subjects secured within 10 minutes. Sir, are you authorizing the use of force against human personnel? I'm authorizing whatever measures are necessary to resolve this situation before it destroys everything we've built here. Back in the human quarters, the decision to escalate became apparent as soon as the gas attack stopped and was replaced by the sound of cutting tools being applied to the outer bulkhead. They're coming through the wall, Dr. Martinez observed, watching the security monitors as sparks began flying from the corridor outside. Emergency protocols are now in effect, Marcus announced to his team. Everyone to the center of the room, away from the walls. Lisa, transmit everything on all frequencies. I want this broadcast to every human ship, station, and outpost within range. Zara crouched in the center of the group, her 3 kittens pressed against her chest. The humans had formed a protective circle around her, their faces grim but determined as they prepared for what was about to happen. I'm so sorry, she whispered to them. This is all my fault. No, Dr. Martinez said firmly, reaching out to touch Zara's shoulder. This is the fault of people who think that genetics determines worth. You and your babies are innocent. The cutting tools made steady progress through the bulkhead, and within minutes they could see light beginning to penetrate the wall as the security teams prepared to breach the quarters. Incoming transmission from Captain Kim, Lisa announced. Captain Kim's face appeared on the emergency display, her expression reflecting the controlled fury that had made her legendary during the corporate wars. Marcus, this is Sarah Kim. I need you to listen very carefully. In approximately 4 minutes, things are going to change dramatically. When they do, I need you and your people to get as far away from any external walls as possible and stay down until I give you the all clear. Captain, what are you planning, Justice? She replied simply. The transmission ended, leaving the humans staring at each other in confusion. 4 minutes seemed like an impossible time frame for a ship that was still hours away from the station. But Captain Kim had not been entirely honest about her ship's capabilities. The Rising Phoenix was not just a diplomatic vessel, it was one of the newest ships in the Human Colonial Authority fleet, equipped with experimental faster-than-light jump technology that allowed for short-range tactical repositioning. The energy requirements were enormous, and using it would drain their power systems for weeks, but sometimes dramatic situations called for dramatic solutions.
Jump coordinates locked, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the navigation station.
All hands prepare for emergency jump. On my mark space around Kepler. 442b suddenly erupted with the distinctive energy signature of an emergency FTL jump as the Rising Phoenix materialized less than 1,000 kilometers from the mining station, close enough that its massive hull was visible through the station's observation ports. On the bridge of the Rising Phoenix, Captain Kim activated the station's emergency communication frequency. Kepler, 42b, control. This is Captain Sarah Kim of the Human Colonial Authority vessel Rising Phoenix. You will cease all aggressive action against human personnel immediately. In the station's command center, Administrator Talks stared at the massive human ship that had appeared impossibly close to his facility. The Rising Phoenix was nearly twice the size of the mining station, bristling with defensive systems and displaying the distinctive markings of the Human Colonial Authority. How did they get here so fast? He whispered. Emergency jump technology, Chief Engineer Mira replied. They must have burned out half their power systems to make a tactical jump that close to the station. Sir, Communications Officer Rax called out, Captain Kim is requesting immediate response. Talks activated the communication system, trying to project calm authority despite the sweat that was beginning to dampen his fur. Captain Kim, this is Administrator Talks. We are dealing with an internal medical emergency that requires immediate containment. Your intervention is not necessary. Administrator, I'm looking at live video feeds from your medical emergency. What I see is armed personnel attempting to breach human quarters to get to a mother and her newborn babies. Would you care to explain how that constitutes medical treatment? The subjects represent a contamination risk that requires proper isolation and evaluation.
I see.
And what kind of contamination requires cutting tools and armed guards? Before Tox could respond, another voice cut into the communication channel. Security Chief Kron speaking from his position outside the human quarters.
Administrator, we've breached the outer bulkhead.
Ready to proceed with subject recovery. The words hung in the space between the station and the ship like a confession of guilt. Captain Kim's voice, when she spoke again, carried the deadly calm that had terrified corporate war veterans across the galaxy. Administrator Tox, you have 30 seconds to order your personnel to stand down and withdraw from the human quarters. If you do not comply, I will consider this an act of aggression against human colonial authority citizens and respond accordingly. Days. Actually, I do. The interspecies cooperation accords give me full authority to protect human personnel under threat, and threatening to breach quartered where